One death away from World War III. A single statement from one of the most dangerous men on the planet just changed everything. Kim Jong Un is watching Iran, and he has already placed his people inside the conflict zone. He didn't ask permission. He didn't send a diplomat. He sent a warning. If even one of my citizens is harmed, the world will never be the same. Every general knows what comes next. Every intelligence agency is on high alert. And yet, nobody is talking about this. One death, one bullet, one order from Pyongyang, and the entire world gets pulled in. Welcome to Currency Archive. Now, before we go any further, if you've been with us for a while, you already know what's coming. But if this is your first time here, think of subscribing, like putting on your reading glasses before the newspaper arrives. You're going to want to see this clearly. Hit that subscribe button and tell us in the comments. Where in the world are you watching from tonight? Because what happens next concerns all of us. On a quiet morning, while most of the world was focused on the ongoing conflict between Iran and its adversaries, a statement arrived from one of the most isolated and unpredictable regimes on Earth. It was not a long statement. It was not filled with complicated diplomatic language, but every intelligence agency that read it understood immediately. Something had just changed. North Korean leader Kim Jong Un had spoken, and what he said was not a request. It was not a warning to be negotiated. It was a line drawn in the sand with the weight of nuclear capability behind it. Kim Jong Un stated clearly that there would be no compromise regarding the safe return of North Korean citizens currently residing in Iran. He went further. He cautioned the world that if even a single North Korean citizen in Iran were harmed, North Korea would enter the conflict without hesitation. 12 words. 12 words that restructured the entire geopolitical equation of the Middle East overnight. To understand why this matters, one must first understand why North Korean citizens are inside Iran at all. This is not a coincidence. This is not a cultural exchange program. North Korea does not send its citizens abroad for tourism or leisure. Every North Korean operating in a foreign country is there for a specific, state-sanctioned purpose. In Iran's case, analysts and intelligence sources have long tracked the presence of North Korean technical advisors, weapons engineers, and military cooperation personnel operating within Iranian military infrastructure. The relationship between Pyongyang and Tehran is not new. It is decades old. It is built on a foundation of mutual necessity. Iran needs advanced weapons technology, ballistic missile expertise, and military engineering that Western sanctions have made impossible to acquire through conventional channels. North Korea needs hard currency, oil, and a reliable partner that operates entirely outside the Western-dominated financial system. They found each other. And over the years, that relationship has grown into something far more significant than most Western analysts have been willing to publicly acknowledge. What Kim Jong Un's statement did was not just issue a warning. It confirmed, in the most official and public manner possible, that North Korean personnel are embedded within Iran's military apparatus right now, during an active conflict. Oh, this is not a peacetime arrangement being discussed in back channels. These are North Korean citizens inside a war zone. And their leader has just told the world that their safety is a matter of national survival for North Korea. This is what intelligence professionals call a tripwire. A tripwire is not a weapon. It is a mechanism. It is a condition set in advance so that a larger action becomes automatic once a specific threshold is crossed. Kim Jong Un did not need to deploy troops to Iran today. He did not need to fire a missile. He simply needed to announce, publicly and officially, that one North Korean death would be enough to bring North Korea into the war. The implications of this are staggering. For the United States and Israel, any military operation targeting Iranian infrastructure now carries a new risk calculation. What if a North Korean advisor is inside the facility being targeted? What if a weapons engineer is in the building when the strike lands? What if one name on the casualty list reads as a citizen of Pyongyang? The answer, according to Kim Jong Un himself, is war. Not a statement, not a diplomatic protest, not a United Nations resolution, war. The international community has spent considerable energy analyzing Iran's military capabilities, its proxy networks, and its relationship with Russia. But North Korea introduces an entirely different dimension. It introduces a nuclear-armed state with no formal diplomatic relationship with the West, no interest in international approval, and a leader who has spent his entire career proving that he does not make empty threats. The world woke up that morning thinking the Iran conflict was a regional problem. By the time Kim Jong Un's statement finished circulating through global intelligence networks, it had become something else entirely. There's a conversation happening right now in the corridors of power in Washington, Tel Aviv, Beijing, and Moscow. It is not being broadcast on mainstream television. It is not being discussed in press conferences. It is the kind of conversation that happens behind closed doors in secured rooms between people who understand that what they are dealing with is no longer a regional conflict with manageable boundaries. The conversation is about an alliance that the Western world spent years dismissing as insignificant. They were wrong. The relationship between Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran is not a modern invention born out of recent sanctions or political convenience. It is a carefully constructed architecture of mutual survival. Each country in this grouping has something the others need. Each country in this grouping is operating under the same fundamental pressure, the pressure of Western economic and military dominance that they collectively want to dismantle. Russia provides legitimacy, military doctrine, and a land bridge of influence across Eurasia. China provides financial infrastructure, manufacturing capacity, and the economic weight to absorb Western sanctions without collapsing. Iran provides geography, sitting at the crossroads of the Middle East, controlling the Strait of Hormuz, the single most critical energy choke point on the planet. And North Korea provides something that none of the others can replicate with the same efficiency. North Korea provides weapons, at scale, without questions, without conditions. This is not speculation. This is documented. Artillery shells from North Korean factories have been recovered on Ukrainian battlefields. Ballistic missile components bearing North Korean engineering signatures have been analyzed by Western intelligence agencies and reported publicly. The transfer of military technology between Pyongyang and Tehran has been tracked, sanctioned, and condemned, and it continued anyway. Because sanctions mean nothing to a country that has already been maximally sanctioned for decades. What Kim Jong Un's statement revealed was not just a warning about his citizens. It revealed the true depth of North Korea's investment in Iran's survival. States do not embed their technical personnel inside foreign military infrastructure unless they have a strategic stake in the outcome. North Korea does not operate on sentiment. It does not send its people into war zones out of friendship or ideology. It sends them because Iran's military capability is partially a North Korean product. Iranian ballistic missiles carry North Korean DNA. Iranian drone technology has been cross-referenced with North Korean engineering blueprints. The weapons that have been striking targets across the Middle East, weapons that have surprised Western analysts with their precision and range, did not emerge from a vacuum. They emerged from a partnership that was built quietly over decades while the world was looking elsewhere. And now that partnership has produced a tripwire that no military planner in Washington or Tel Aviv had formally priced into their strategic models. Consider the position of Israel's military planners right now. Every strike on Iranian infrastructure must now be preceded by a question that was not on the checklist 6 months ago. Is there a North Korean national inside this facility? The answer to that question is now a matter of potential world war, not exaggeration, not geopolitical theater. Actual war involving a nuclear-armed state that has demonstrated the willingness to act unilaterally and without warning. Consider the position of the United States. Washington currently has tens of thousands of troops stationed across the Middle East. It has aircraft carriers in regional waters. It has built what officials have described as the most extensive air defense umbrella in the region's history. And yet none of that infrastructure was designed to manage a simultaneous military confrontation with North Korea. The alliance is no longer hidden. Kim Jong Un made sure of that. What was once discussed in intelligence briefings as a background concern has now been publicly confirmed by the leader of one of the most dangerous military states on Earth. He stood before the world and said, "My people are there, my weapons are there, my investment is there, and if you touch any of it, you're no longer fighting Iran. You are fighting all of us." The world had a name for this kind of arrangement once before. It called it a world war. There's a concept in military strategy that most people never encounter until it is too late to act on it. It is called cascading failure. Cascading failure does not begin with an explosion. It does not begin with a declaration of war or a headline that screams crisis. It begins with something small, something that looks, in isolation, like a manageable problem, a single decision, a single miscalculation, a single name on a casualty list that should not be there, and then the dominoes begin to fall. Kim Jong Un's statement introduced exactly this mechanism into an already fragile global system. He did not need to fire a single weapon to change the economic reality of every market on Earth. He simply needed to speak. Because the moment a nuclear-armed state publicly declares that one death is enough to trigger its entry into an active war, every financial model, every risk calculation, every investment thesis that was built on the assumption of a contained regional conflict becomes instantly unreliable. Markets do not wait for wars to start. Markets price in the probability of wars starting. And that probability just increased in a way that no algorithm on Wall Street had factored into its models 48 hours ago. Let us begin with energy. The Strait of Hormuz is not simply a body of water. It is the single most consequential choke point in the global energy supply chain. Approximately 20% of all the world's traded oil passes through this narrow corridor every single day. Every tanker that carries crude oil from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE, and Iraq to the refineries of Asia and Europe passes through waters that Iran has the military capability to disrupt. This was already known. This was already priced, partially, into oil markets. But North Korea's entry into the equation changes the calculus entirely. Because North Korea is not just a ground force, North Korea possesses submarine warfare capability. It possesses ballistic missiles with ranges that extend well beyond the Korean peninsula. It possesses the kind of asymmetric military tools that are specifically designed to inflict maximum disruption on adversaries who are conventionally superior. If North Korea enters this conflict, the Strait of Hormuz does not become more dangerous by 10%. It becomes a different kind of threat entirely. One that the United States Navy, already stretched across multiple theaters, would have to manage simultaneously with a potential escalation on the Korean peninsula itself. Oil markets understand this, and oil markets have not even begun to price it in fully. Now consider gold. Throughout recorded financial history, gold has functioned as the world's most reliable crisis barometer. When institutional confidence and stability collapses, capital moves. It does not ask permission. It does not wait for official guidance. It moves toward the assets that have survived every previous collapse. And gold is at the top of that list. The current gold price is already reflecting extraordinary levels of institutional anxiety. But what Kim Jong Un's statement introduced was a new category of risk that gold markets had not yet absorbed. The risk is not simply war. The risk is multi-front, multi-actor, nuclear-adjacent conflict between states that collectively represent a significant portion of global military capability. That is not a regional crisis. That is a systemic crisis. And systemic crises produce gold movements that rewrite record books. Silver follows the same logic, but with an additional industrial dimension that makes its position even more acute. Silver is not simply a monetary metal. It is a critical component in defense manufacturing, electronics and the energy infrastructure that every modern military depends upon. When conflict escalates to the scale that Kim Jong Un's statement implies, silver does not just move as a safe haven. It moves as a strategic resource that suddenly every government on Earth needs more of. The business community watching these developments must understand something fundamental. The window between a public declaration of a tripwire and the moment that tripwire gets crossed is not measured in months. It is measured in days, sometimes hours. North Korean citizens are in Iran right now. The conflict in Iran is not pausing. Strikes are continuing. Targets are being selected. And somewhere inside that target selection process is a question that no military planner wants to answer incorrectly. Because one wrong answer does not just start a war. It starts the kind of war that restructures the entire global economic order. And the clock is already running. History does not announce itself. It does not send a formal notification. It does not schedule an appointment. It does not give the world a reasonable amount of time to prepare, adjust, and respond. History arrives without warning. And the only people who survive it intact are the ones who were already watching the signals before everyone else understood what those signals meant. Kim Jong Un's statement is a signal, not a possibility, not a diplomatic formality, not the kind of geopolitical noise that fills international news cycles and disappears within 48 hours. It is a precise, calculated, publicly delivered declaration from a nuclear-armed leader who has spent his entire career ensuring that the world takes him seriously when he speaks. And right now, the world is not taking him seriously enough. The current timeline of escalation is not theoretical. It is operational. North Korean citizens are physically present inside Iran at this moment. The conflict is active. Strikes are continuing. The pace of military operations in the region has not slowed, it has accelerated. Every hour that passes without a North Korean casualty is not evidence that the crisis is contained. It is simply evidence that the trigger has not yet been pulled. The distinction matters enormously. 3 scenarios now sit on the table of every serious strategic analyst working in government, finance, and military intelligence across the globe. The first scenario is de-escalation. In this scenario, back-channel diplomacy produces a quiet agreement. North Korean personnel are relocated away from active strike zones. Iran and its adversaries reach a temporary ceasefire. Kim Jong Un's statement is allowed to fade into the background as a reminder of how close the world came to something catastrophic. Markets stabilize. Oil retreats from its elevated levels. Gold and silver pull back from their crisis premiums. The world exhales. This scenario is possible, but it requires a level of coordinated diplomatic competence from multiple hostile actors simultaneously, actors who have demonstrated repeatedly that coordination is not their strength. The second scenario is containment. In this scenario, the conflict continues at its current intensity, but careful, almost surgical, efforts are made by all parties to avoid North Korean casualties. Targets are selected with unusual precision. Certain facilities are quietly removed from strike lists. The war continues, but it continues around the tripwire rather than through it. Markets remain volatile but do not collapse. The global economy absorbs the uncertainty the way it has absorbed every previous Middle Eastern conflict, painfully but survivably. This scenario is also possible. But it assumes that in the fog of active military operations, with drones flying at night and missiles traveling at hypersonic speeds, Every single targeting decision will be made with perfect information and perfect execution. Military history does not support that assumption. The third scenario is escalation. In this scenario, a strike lands where it should not land. A name appears on a casualty report that triggers exactly the mechanism Kim Jong Un described. North Korea enters the conflict. The Korean Peninsula ignites simultaneously. The United States finds itself managing 2 active military theaters on opposite sides of the globe. China, which shares a border with North Korea and has its own strategic interests in both theaters, is forced to make decisions. It has spent decades trying to avoid making publicly. The Strait of Hormuz closes or becomes functionally impassable. 20% of the world's daily oil supply disappears from the market overnight. Energy prices do not rise. They detonate. Stock markets in every major economy enter freefall. Supply chains that were already fragile from years of geopolitical disruption snap entirely. And gold and silver, the assets that serious investors have been accumulating quietly while the mainstream financial press was focused elsewhere, become not just profitable positions, they become lifelines. For the business community watching these developments, the strategic message is not complicated. It does not require a doctorate in international relations or 20 years of market experience to understand. It requires only the willingness to look at what is actually happening, not what the headlines are choosing to emphasize. A nuclear-armed state has publicly declared a tripwire inside an active war zone. The tripwire is not theoretical. The personnel are real. The conflict is real. The clock is real. The only question that remains for serious decision makers, the entrepreneurs, the investors, the business builders who understand that wealth is not built during crises but protected before them, is not whether this situation is dangerous. It is whether they are positioned for what comes next. Because Kim Jong Un did not issue a 24-hour warning to the world. He issued it to history. And history is listening.